Hello, this is Farm Future News, podcast 4. Welcome at watching this video. Please like or subscribe if you really like this video and tell your friends, tell your colleagues about this video so that this channel can grow and you get more information, more quality advices, and you can benefit from it. Today I like to talk about something I really find always surprising. Coming to Africa, one of the first, and talking to farmers, I hear this very frequent. Mr. President, Mr. Politics, please help us. Help us. We are poor because you don't help us. Is that true? Is it true that you depend on the politics to become successful? You're a farmer. Or you are an agricultural service supplier. Do you depend on the government? What is the task of the government? To create security, to create good educational infrastructure, to secure the environment in which you can be an entrepreneur. Make sure you have low inflation. So don't spend too much money. Don't create artificial money. And create low interest rates. Stabilize exchange rates. That's the core responsibility from government. You as a farmer, I as a consultant, I'm not in service of government. The government is in service of me. So the responsibility starts with me. I have ideas. I have opportunities. I see a position for myself in a market. I see margins. But I also see risks, threats. And it's that kind of environment and where that's where you are. Don't expect from the government that they will create your successful farm. It's you. You need to farm. You need to use your knowledge, your capital, your friends, your infrastructure in order to become successful. But you can do a lot yourself. So I hope through this channel we can contribute to your knowledge of farming and the opportunities. Africa has huge opportunities. Farming in general in the world have huge opportunities. With a shrinking world population, poverty should go down. Hunger should not be anymore an issue. We need to produce sufficient food, maybe with less farmers. Not everyone who calls themselves farmer is dreaming about farming. Maybe you are dreaming about something else. These discussions need to take place. I give ideas. I give sometimes a little bit a kick in the ass, but I hope you take your own responsibility. It's not Mr. President, It's your responsibility. Thank you. Today we have two items that are very closely related to one another. The first one is soil health. The second one is plant health. We will go deep into what does that mean, soil health, and second, what does it mean, plant health, and how do we both measure it, and why is it important to know what the soil health is and what the plant health is. So first, I'd like to introduce soil health. The two gentlemen of 8 PhD introducing the soil health.
Soil health tests be run. So we want to talk today just a little bit about what is the soil health test and how can you get pretty much the same information without having to spend the money on an actual soil health test.
All right, well, when you think about soil health tests, there's a couple things going on here. First of all, we do really care about what the nutrient levels are in soils, and even the soil health test, you're going to pull a soil test. But what we're kind of trying to add to that with the soil health test is just to find out, well, what's the microbial activity out in your soil? And so what they're looking for is respiration. So they're looking for how much carbon dioxide is getting eaten up by the soil, how much oxygen is being released, and they can find out exactly what's going on out there and how many living things are in the soil.
You know, just off a regular soil test, if I have complete soil analysis, I can pretty much tell you if your soil is healthy or not.
Well, one of the things that we look at on a soil test is organic matter levels. And I know it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly how much fertilizer you put on for a crop, but as we see organic matter levels rising, well, organic matter is where microbes live in your soil. So if you've got higher levels of organic matter, that's a good thing.
Yeah, so usually if we have, let's say 5, 6, 7% organic matter, we've got a much healthier soil as opposed to when we have 1 or 2% organic matter. The other thing I'm looking at is just the overall nutrient balance. If I find there are some nutrients excessively high and other nutrients completely deficient, typically we don't have as healthy of a soil. And you think about why. Okay, if crops out there or any plants out there are suffering, well, naturally then they're not going to produce as much. They're not going to have as many roots that are growing. And one of the most important things for a healthy soil is having good roots growing out there, because those roots do a lot of things to stimulate the overall microbial activity in the soil. So again, on that regular soil test, we're looking for organic matter and then just an overall nice balance of nutrients, including we want that pH kind of in a neutral area.
Now, as we're walking out in the field too, Brian, one other thing that I really look for is, do I see residue from 3 previous crops? It's normal to see last year's residue out in the field. It takes some time for that to break down, and that's what microbes do in soil. And when we have good, healthy soils, residue breaks down timely. If it's not breaking down timely, we may have an issue with soil health.
And of course, there are other things we can look at too, everything from drainage to compaction. So the whole thing here today is we just wanted to let you know there are specific soil health tests, but a lot of times if you just make a visual observation out in the field and you look at the regular soil analysis, you can determine whether that soil is healthy or not.
Most of us go to the doctor from time to time and get a physical, get a checkup. They may put us on a treadmill and do a stress test. They may check our heart, listen to our lungs, see if everything's ticking and clicking the way it's supposed to. Well, guess what? Your soil is very similar. Your soil needs to breathe, and you can do a stress test on your soil. A common tool that we use is a penetrometer. This measures PSI of good, healthy soil. Good healthy soil should contain 25% air, and this air needs to be homogenized or deposited in each and every cubic inch of the soil. Very simple, handheld, go out in your field, push down. Stop when you hit 200 PSI. 200 PSI on a penetrometer will equate to about 25% air within your soil. You have to have air for the microbes. You have to have air to accompany nutrients to the plant, and you have to have air to create water holding capacity. The air in your soil is crucial. It's kind of like breathing. You have to do it all the time. The deeper you can put this penetrometer, the better off you are. The high pressure front, that is the inhalation portion of the meteorology world, that heavy sinking air of a high pressure front is designed to push air down deep into the soil. The microbes will take a big deep breath, they'll start partying and reproducing and doing their job. The oxygen can be pulled from the air, and that will help accompany minerals to the plant. And 78% of this atmospheric air is nitrogen, and it's free. The beautiful thing that the climatologists have told us is every breath of air we're taking has over 4. But if you don't get air into the soil, the cycle or the carbon cycle will not be complete. Compaction is one of the biggest limiting factors in agriculture today. So all of you fellas that have been looking at your soil tests and working on getting that soil test perfect, that's fantastic. It's awesome. It's beautiful. But keep in mind, those minerals only make up about 3% of the plant. The minerals in your soil that show up on your soil test are there to primarily structure the soil, to create the environment, and then the microbes that have to have air will make your plant. This is the respiration portion of it. These tools aren't very expensive. They're easy to use. I figured it out. There's hope for everybody. And this is talking about the aerobic or the respiration part of your soil. Breathing is important. The other thing that's important is our heartbeat. A lot of times we don't think about it much unless it stops. And our heartbeat is electrical. And this electrical heartbeat can be measured in the doctor's office with an EKG or an ECG, an electrocardiogram. Well, we don't have an electrocardiogram for the soil, but we do have an EC meter. Inexpensive, easy to use, EC, electrical conductivity meter, basically checks the heartbeat of the soil. Almost every microbe within the soil will carry about 1/2 of a millivolt of electricity. This will pick up on the microbial electricity. It'll measure nitrate nitrogen, ammoniated nitrogen, salt, and sodium, whether they're inorganic or organic. It doesn't tell us where the electricity is coming from, but it will tell us how much electricity is in the soil. 9 times out of 10, this meter will tell us what the problem is, either too much electricity or not enough. Many times as we look at the soil, young plants, whether they've just been planted or whether they're a perennial coming out of winter, coming out of dormancy, most plants like to start their life at about a 0.3, 0.4, or 0.5 on this EC meter. The more consistent that number is as you push this down through the soil, the more biological and the more consistent, the more homogenized your environment is, that will invite the roots to go into that, and they will enjoy that. You have microbes there, you have good electricity, you have created the environment that the roots enjoy. A 0.3, a 0.4, a 0.5 is the electricity that all plants need to start their life, whether they're coming out of a dormancy, whether it's a transplant, or whether it's a seed you've just put into the ground. On the United States ground, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, Asia, doesn't matter. These numbers are consistent all across the world. When you look at reproduction, that takes a little bit more energy. So when we started, we were at a 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. Well, now you want to double or triple those numbers for reproduction. Reproduction is going to be a 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, even 0.9. That's the electricity that needs to create seed, needs to hang and fill fruit, needs to fill and create the fruit that you're about to sell. The microbes will do this if your soil is healthy, but this meter can give you a wonderful heads up on what's going on, what's happening, and what's about to possibly happen. Key point, many of your fungal, viral, and bacterial diseases enjoy a too rapid or too high of heartbeat or too low of heartbeat or electricity. What do I mean by that? If you're over a 0.9 on this meter, you're going to have some ruckus. There will be some problems. If you're under a 0.2, pucker up. Bad things are coming. Detrimental, pathogenic, disease-causing fungus, algae, and mold enjoys a low electrical value of the soil. So your plants may look good, but if you check the soil and you're under a 0.2, you better do something quick because hell may be coming and it will come in a hurry.
Now we know something about soil health. Secondly, we like to talk about plant health. The health of the plant. How do we measure it? And why does it matter?
So we're standing in our field of spring triticale AAC Delight, and we're going to go through a refractometer test to just give a general indication of plant health. So what you do is you just grab plant leaf tissue. So we're not testing the seeds or the roots or the stems, but the plant leaf tissue, and we're going to grab it all together and put it inside our garlic press here. Now the intent is that we're just grabbing the plant juice that's in the leaf. So once Dad's finished, he's going to start pushing through, and you want to make sure that you're pushing gently and sort of milking it so that you're not getting too much, you're not getting plant tissue through, but just the sap. And so by measuring the content of the sap, we're going to look through how much light is refracted through the sap via our refractometer. And that'll give us a general indication of overall plant health.
Does Brix tell you everything you need to know? No. Is it the first step that needs to be taken? Absolutely, it does. It's the first step.
The first step.
The first step is to see the health of your plant
So
from
if
the
you're not
get-go.
checking Brix, you don't know anything about the plant.
That is correct. You don't know enough about the plant in order to say anything with authority.
Okay, do you check a bottom leaf, a top leaf, a middle leaf, a center leaf? No matter what the plant is, where do you check?
You can test anything you want. So if you want to test the bottom leaf, you can test the bottom leaf. I've tested those. You want to test the top leaf? You can do that too. If you want to test the middle leaf, go right ahead. And if you want to test the fruit, you want to test the stem, you want to test the root, you can test any part of it. I've tested all of them. We know that the leaf Brix is going to give the consistent readings. This is going to be mostly reflective of the health level. So because of that, yes, it is the first step.
Today I'd like to speak to you about a tool that's used and probably the single most important tool that's used in biological agriculture and probably should be used in growing any food, including food in the home garden. And this little tool is called the refractometer. You take a garlic crusher and you crush a leaf of the crop that you're growing, of any vegetable, for example, in the home garden, or your orchard crop or your field crop, and you squeeze a little juice onto the plate of the refractometer and you look through this little sawn-off telescope and you're measuring something called Brix level. What you're doing in effect is that you're monitoring photosynthesis, how well the plant is photosynthesizing. Your role as a grower, essentially, is that you're a chlorophyll manager. You're looking after that green pigment. You don't want white colours and stripes and blotches because in that case that's called chlorosis. You've lost some of the sugar factories. The sugar factories that produce this basic building block in the plant called glucose, and that building block really governs the quality of the plant, the nutrient density of the plant, how much That plant is going to feed the biology that's smothered around the plant roots, waiting for its feed of glucose on a daily basis. The plant produces sugars through photosynthesis. Half of those sugars are translocated down to the roots, and 60% of that half, which is 30% of its total production of sugar, of glucose, is given away. It's sort of a rule of the universe. Give and you shall receive. The plant doesn't give away 30% of its sugar production, of its basic building block, without getting something in return. And of course what it gets in return is the delivery of nutrients, because the microorganisms that are smothered around that root waiting for their daily feed of sugar, those microorganisms of course deliver minerals into the plant. They protect the plant from disease, they fix nitrogen from the 74,000 tonnes of gas, nitrogen gas that hovers above every hectare. They solubilize phosphate. In fact, every mineral has a microorganism behind it. So it's a huge role they play, and the plant well and truly understands that, even if we've failed to understand that in many cases. And so how well you're feeding that microbe army is governed and can be measured with this little tool called the refractometer. And we'll talk at length shortly about just how you use it and just what it means in various contexts. So you're squeezing a little juice onto the plate of this little tool, and what's happening, that's why it's called a refractometer, is that the light refracts as you hold it up and look through the little device. The light refracts through the dissolved solids and the plant sap that you've squeezed onto the screen. And basically you're monitoring the dissolved solids in that plant. You're monitoring the nutrient density. You're monitoring how well that plant is photosynthesizing, how many minerals and sugars and so forth have been delivered to the plant. So it's a real measure of plant health, and the guideline is that the healthier the plant, the lower the disease resistance. And so you're measuring something called degrees of Brix, and it's called measuring Brix levels. And the aim for most crops, not all crops, but the aim for most crops is to try and get above the magical figure of 12 degrees Brix. And if you can get your crop across that line by having good nutrition in the crop, then you have this inherent, this almost automatic pest resistance, particularly insect resistance, but also fungal resistance. You've got a healthy plant, you've got the plant's immune system powering to the max, so consequently you're going to have a far less need for chemical intervention, and that's the aim of this whole approach, to get away from these petrochemicals and all of their negative side effects. So as I said earlier, the aim is to try and get above 12 degrees Brix. Certainly for this tomato plant that would be the aim. And what we've achieved then is, a good level of nutrient density. The higher the better, obviously. And we need to understand, for example, insect pressure and what insects are about, and we think of them as the scourge of our crops, but of course they're there for a purpose. There is nothing accidental in nature. And in the case of the insect's role in the great scheme of things is that the insect is a garbage collector. And if we produce garbage, the insect will arise. The findings originally came from a rather brilliant researcher by the name of Professor Phil Callahan, and in his landmark work, a book called Tuning into Nature, Phil showed that the feelers on insects aren't actually feelers, that the feelers on insects are actually very complex antennae, and they're designed to pick up infrared radiation that the plant releases, and the insect is designed to eat substandard plants. It's designed to take out the garbage in the gene pool. And of course, if we produce garbage, the garbage collectors will arrive, and that's exactly the deal. If you've got a garden that's filled, or a crop that's filled with insects and requires increasing amounts of chemical intervention, then you've done a poor job as a chlorophyll manager, and you've actually called those insects in, so you created the problem.
What is your idea about pigs? How do we produce our pork? Most people associate pigs and pork with large industrial production. But actually, there are different methods. And especially for our West African circumstances, there are production methodologies that are really to be considered. I like to introduce pasture pigs.
In livestock, perhaps it's important to realize that the biggest differences in quality and in just production techniques comes in the animals that currently are produced with no pasture whatsoever, what we call no salad bar at all. And so when we look at the overarching idea of pastured pigs, it gives us a product and a production protocol that is farther differentiated from the conventional industrial concentrated animal feeding operation than, for example, cows, which spend most of their time, even in conventional circles, out on pasture. So it's the pigs, it's the poultry that never sees outdoors, that never sees the sunshine. We want to start with the pigs because everybody loves bacon, and let's have good bacon, and let's have bacon that actually helps the ecology and the nest of where those pigs are raised. So why do we raise pastured pigs? Why put pigs on pasture? A lot of people come to this with some misconceptions. They think, oh, I'm going to put them on pasture so I don't have to buy any feed, or I'm going to put them on so, they'll just take care of themselves out there and I won't have to, fool with them. This is going to save feed and labor. Both of those are incorrect. The reason it doesn't save feed is because they exercise so much. So they actually run off many of the calories that they ingest from the feed. So your feed to meat ratio, your conversion ratio, is going to be about the same as it is in a confinement situation. They will supplement, of course, with all the grass, but that doesn't really put weight on the pig. You're not going to save labor because the pigs are going to be farther away. They're going to be, away from the house, away from where you are, so you have running time in checking on them. Why we want to pasture pigs is that it does reduce capital investment. You don't have to build a house. You don't have to pour concrete. You can get into pastured pigs with very, very simple infrastructure. You can bootstrap your way in. That's a wonderful thing. So getting in becomes easier. And part of our whole series here is making it easy for a young person to enter the vocation of farming. Next thing it does, of course, is it improves soil and vegetation. You can go into a brambly, honeysuckle, blackberry infested place, poor ground, poor place, and over time you can move that to a very high state of fertility and increased biomass vegetation capturing solar energy to do decomposition, increase organic matter. So there's a tremendous improvement of soil and vegetation potential. It produces pork with a more dense and balanced nutrition. So, one of the most interesting studies we've done with many of our chefs is do displacement studies where you take 10 pounds of our pork, 10 pounds of regular industry pork, and ours actually displaces significantly less water, which means it weighs more per cubic inch. So it's a denser and it actually has a more balanced nutritional ratio. It's aromatically and aesthetically sensually romantic. When we show these pastures or bring pigs out to them, guess what? There's no smell, there's no flies, there's no odor, and we think that good farming has to be aesthetically and aromatically, sensually romantic. So it offers an easy entry to new farmers. We desperately need on-ramps into farming today. The average American farmer is now 60 years old. The problem is that when the hurdles and the impediments to entry impede young people from getting in, old people can't get out. So the beauty of pastured pigs is that we can actually start. We can start with a few. We can start small. We can start with very cheap infrastructure, and we can get in, which allows that level of entry for a young farmer. That's a wonderful thing. Or if you're an existing farmer and you want to add this as an enterprise, you're not looking at thousands and thousands of dollars of additional infrastructure development and capital cost in order to add this second enterprise, to take advantage of maybe some marginal acreages, your woodland, some edges, those kinds of things. You can add that fairly cheaply. Another reason for pastured pigs is that it decentralizes production and manure. As you know, right now, industrial conventional pig production is very centralized in massive houses, which creates massive manure loads. When the industry, takes a camera picture of a confinement pig house and says, look at all the production we're getting out of this small footprint, they don't show, the acres of grain going in and the acres of handling manure going out. And my goodness, if North Carolina didn't get a hurricane every 2 years to flush all the manure lagoons in the confinement hog houses, the whole state would be covered up with hog manure right now. So, so being able to take all this out into more expansive land, and be assured that pasturing pigs takes land. As we go through our square footage requirement, our paddock requirement, you're going to see that the whole thing here is not confinement. It's not outdoor confinement. It does take a lot of acreage, and so it is lucrative per acreage, even at the low densities that I'm going to describe. But it does require a fair amount of land. In other words, if you've got just 1 acre or 2 acres, yes, you can absolutely do pastured pigs, but you're not going to do very many of them. Otherwise, you're going to have a moonscape, and we're going to be back into hog cholera and all the things that the reason we don't want to, that the industry is scared to death of people like us that have pigs outside. We don't want that to happen. We want to lead by example. But when you see the pastured pig, all of it's there. The place to, you don't have to spread the manure. You don't need all of that infrastructure and equipment material to spread everything, because it's decentralized. So you're actually moving those pigs out across the landscape rather than confining them and centralizing them in one little spot where you have a toxicity pathogen problem within the system, which leads us to the next reason to do pastured pigs, is that it reduces pathogens and sickness. Again, as long as they're moved onto fresh ground. And so if I say movement one time, I'm going to say movement 100 times during this series, because it is the movement, it is the constant movement that not only gets the pigs onto fresh vegetation, fresh forage, the movement is also what gets them away from yesterday's excrement. So we're not putting them on a slatted floor with a slurry manure pit underneath, like the confinement houses. We don't want them to be in their toilet, for days after day after day. And so we want to keep moving them, and that movement actually gets them moved away from hosting pathogens, sickness problems from before. So our whole rest periods between stays, so they're only going to be on a given spot for a few days, and then there's going to be a long rest period, 50, 60, 75 days. There's going to be this long rest period, and that rest period is when the pathogens and all the toxicity, when it all dissipates and the ecological womb metabolizes all of that into itself, into that nest again, to keep things clean and hygienic and sanitary for the next time when the pigs come through. That recuperation time, that rest time, is absolutely critical for making sure that those pigs stay healthy and happy. Of course, the green material does worlds to make sure that the pigs stay healthy and happy. Just the regular mineral, antibiotic, carotene load in what we call the salad bar, which again is why you want to move them so they're on fresh, clean ground routinely. And finally, it makes more succulent, juicy pork due to exercise. Here's the deal. Muscle tissue does not turn moist without exercise. My father-in-law used to raise pigs. Of course, almost everybody around here, had a few pigs back, 80 years ago. And his pig house, and yes, he had one of those awful moonscaped, unrotated yards there. But the pigs jumped up. He had a 24-inch threshold. The pigs had to jump up in to get into the pig house, and where they could eat and lounge and drink. And I asked him, I said, Daddy, why do you have that 24-inch threshold there? He said, well, that makes them jump. That exercises their hams, and their hams become more moist with the exercised muscles, so that it become more like the shoulders instead of just the dry ham. So the rule of thumb on meats is that if a meat is exercised, it's more succulent but less tender, and if it's unexercised, it's dry but more tender. So think about a chicken. You know, the thigh of a chicken is more succulent, but it's tougher, takes longer to cook. A breast is drier, but it's more tender, but doesn't get any exercise. The best reasons to have pigs on pasture is simply the fresh air, exercise, and sunshine that they get outside to actually stimulate what we call gamboling in the pasture, which creates a more moist, succulent product, more nutritionally balanced. It's a much better eating experience, and of course, the pigs enjoy it more than anything. And so it actually, allows the pigs to be in a habitat that honors the pigs, that respects the pigs. They can express their greatest pigness in an outdoor setting. That's their natural habitat. And of course, in being happy, most expressive pigs of pigness, they actually provide vitality and the best nutrition and eating experience for us. So when we're selecting pigs for pastured pigs, it's important to get the phenotype right. The pigs that the industry uses, we call them Arnold Schwarzenegger piggies. They've got a great big rear end and they look like a square. What we want is a more torpedo phenotype. So if you see this black spotted pig, that's a perfect pig for what we're talking about here, because he's straight. You can lay a stick from his shoulder, and his hindquarter is all straight. The red one right there is excellent as well. Sloped off a little bit in the back, sloped off in the front, and straight down the sides. They have a great gait. They walk really well. These real square, boxy Arnold Schwarzenegger piggies, they don't like to walk, they actually don't perform in this kind of a setting. This is asking a little bit of the pig. We need them to put on a little bit of fat. They need to have a really healthy immune system, and we need them to be able to exercise, to move, because when we get ready to take these to slaughter, we actually take them over to the road, and they actually walk the 3/4 of a mile back to the house, the corral. They gotta walk, so they gotta be really fit, ambulatory, and all that. So this is a pretty good one coming right here. You can see he's flat along the edges, and his rear doesn't stick out too far, and he's sloped off in the back, sloped off. We call that a torpedo phenotype. That's what we're looking for. Notice we've got all sorts of different colors, and people are always asking, what breed of pig do I get? What we have found is there's way more difference within breeds than there is from breed to breed. Every breed has pigs with this kind of torpedo body phenotype that we like, and pigs that are like Arnold Schwarzenegger piggy that have been bred up, and they're this square box with a big rear, and they walk kind of arthritically, and it's because it does hurt for them to walk. They're overbred and over lean. So what we look for is phenotype, not breed. So there's red ones and spotted ones and black ones and all sorts of different kinds here. But the bottom line is they all have this kind of torpedo phenotype that works for us.
Now, our last item. Our last item is about the Paperpot. As maybe you know, Terra Agric is distributor of the Paperpot technology for West Africa. We like to introduce this technology on a frequent basis because it is easy to use, cheap, and very reliable. Please see how to fill and how to seed your seedlings, and how to maintain the whole technology. Thank you.